Hi and welcome to Boston Media Theory. My name's Marcus Breen. This is a program where we talk to people who are involved in media and communication, who work in research centres, universities, in the industry, and indeed tonight in publishing. And so tonight I'm pleased and delighted to welcome Gita Manaktala, who's the Editorial Director at MIT Press. Welcome, Gita. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Not at all. It's great to have somebody who is deeply engaged in the production of media and who is also, I guess, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but also deeply involved in observing what's going on in the research community and then bringing some of it to life, perhaps more than others.
That's right.
Yeah, right. So let's start with the question of how you became engaged in publishing in this industry.
Okay. Well, that was a very long time ago
Okay.
in a galaxy far, far
Yeah,
away.
right.
Actually, it was here in Boston when I graduated from college. Actually, before I graduated from college, I went to New York for a semester, and I worked in publishing in New York City when I was, barely 20 years old. And I was so damaged by the experience that I was I was happy to come back to school.
Okay.
I came quickly back to Cambridge and finished school, and I thought, publishing's really not for me. But then I was casting around, and I was going to apply to graduate school, and I got a temp job at the MIT Press, and I worked in the publicity department, and I worked there for about a month, and then they hired somebody and let me go. And when that person started, the publicity manager, she called me and she said, I need an assistant and I've heard about you and would you come and work here? And I said, absolutely not. I've worked there and I know how much work it's going to be. I'm not interested.
Right.
But I needed the money, so I took the job, and that's how I started working at MIT, and that was over 25 years ago, and it's been a really amazing experience and an amazing education,
Yes,
because the MIT Press publishes books in so many different fields, and I got to read a lot of them. I got to read a lot of stuff I never would have read otherwise.
Yeah.
So it's been fascinating.
Well, that 25 years, of course, has seen not only the emergence of the internet as a public tool for disseminating knowledge and producing it, but also it's seen a number of different claims made about the death of the publishing industry.
Absolutely.
So we should talk about that. You're still here 25 years later.
Yeah, rumors of our death have been greatly exaggerated.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Well, one of my former colleague, and in fact he was a great friend, and still is a great friend, Ted Streifus, talked in his dissertation about the way that the book looked like it was going to be reformatted and potentially face an early death. And while Ted's work is exemplary, I think he'd probably have to go back and rethink what he was going to argue now.
Right.
Yes.
No, I've just been reading his book, The Late Age of Print, which is a fantastic book.
It is indeed.
Yeah,
indeed.
it's really good. Yeah.
You might be surprised to see my name in the front of that somewhere.
Is it really? I'm going to look for it.
You may
now,
well find that. Yes, I was on Ted's committee
that's
for his
great.
PhD, which is where that book came from. But it's an important contribution.
Absolutely.
But important in the sense in which we need to think about how media changes. And one of the exciting aspects of the opportunity to talk to you was to see how you're engaged in really multiple tracks. The track of producing research in a traditional form, in book form,
right.
But much of the research about new technology.
That's right.
And about digital technology.
That's
and this is the lived contradiction.
Yes.
It seemed to me.
Yes, it is. Certainly in media studies and new media studies, one would expect that there wouldn't be the interest in books that there may be in more traditional fields, for example, of the humanities or but it's actually the case that media studies scholars seem to understand that the book is a particular and and appealing format with a lot of distinct affordances that are still meaningful and valuable even in the digital age. And so one of the interesting and paradoxical things about living in the time in which we live is that this profusion of new media forms and formats really clarifies what the book is in relation to those other formats, and why it persists and why it endures, and why it's such an appealing format for certain kinds of research. Books are good for capturing long-form arguments. They're a stable format, an archival format, and they're meant to preserve the kinds of arguments and the kinds of ideas that really need to persist in time.
Okay.
So that's how I would describe it.
And we'd see that then set against the virtual, where there's a real transience around that, isn't there?
Yes, there can be. I mean, if we think of, one of the things that we're realizing, right, is that final form knowledge is only one kind of knowledge that we value, but we do value it. On the other hand, we have, the wiki with its updates and its overwrites. We have the blog, which is an open-ended form that can incorporate commentary and response. And those are valuable knowledge forms as well.
Sure.
So the book takes its place alongside these new formats, and they all contribute something distinctive, I think.
Yeah, it's a wonderful way of seeing it, rather than as a kind of fight to the death.
That's right.
Which I think was how it was set up a little while ago.
Absolutely. And that's just, the history of media tells us that that's not how it works.
No, that's right.
Yeah.
Not at all. And so how do you find it in the hothouse environment of an MIT or even of a Cambridge, being the editorial director of a large international press, the kind of pressures that are involved in making decisions about what to pay attention to?
Oh, that's a huge challenge. I think that's a huge challenge for all of us now, regardless of where we work, because we have access to so much information and so much content.
Sure.
People my age say this all the time about, this is a big difference between us and our children. We became readers because when we were growing up, there was really nothing to do. There were only a few things on television. There was never enough on the radio. There were never enough books. There were never enough comic books. So we were desperate for diversion, and our children are just spoiled by choice, right?
Sure.
Because they have access to so much more. There's a famous quip that former MIT president made about an MIT education. Jerry Wiesner said this in the 70s. He said, "Getting an education at MIT is like trying to drink from a fire hose." And some clever undergraduates went off and made a hack about it. They actually connected a fire hydrant with a fire hose to a water fountain, so you could actually drink from the, from the fire hydrant. But I bring that up because I think that's what it's like for everybody now, having access to so much information. How do we know what to pay attention to?
Right.
And that's, that's the new economics of media and information, is trying to capture attention.
Sure.
Yeah.
Have book sales been negatively impacted by the competition, as it were?
Yes, yes, for attention and readers. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, we have a lot of choices now, and so book sales. You still have blockbusters, even in scholarly, in the world of scholarship. But I would say that the pressure really is on to find and write and publish books that are so well edited, that embody some narrative tension, even if they're very scholarly, and that can keep people engaged.
Right.
Yeah.
So is that really what is that kind of sort of your job description?
That's part of it. Yeah. Is to identify those works and work with the authors to develop books like that. Yep.
I've always been of the view that, and I was a journalist a long time ago, that good writing is always good writing, and that it's pretty hard to beat good writing.
It's very hard to beat good writing. Yes, but there's the additional challenge of getting getting people to the book in the first place is harder than it ever was, I think.
So what does that mean about knowledge?
Mm-hmm.
How do you approach questions of knowledge from a book publishing perspective? Has that had to change somewhat?
What do you mean by that, questions of knowledge?
Well, the way that a book, as you say, embodies the author, as
Yes.
it were,
Mm-hmm.
and then engages the reader in real effort.
Yeah.
And then is expected to produce has a particular kind of formation
Mm-hmm.
in the relationship between the book and the reader and the book and the
Right.
text.
Right.
And it's temporal, and it's also the kind of intellectual processes seem somewhat different. If I think about the kinds of experiences that even I teach my students, but that many students have, the vast majority of those experiences are around virtual media, rapidly moving visual culture, really, which seems to embody a different kind of knowledge, a different kind of experience of what it means to know something.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm fascinated with these kinds of distinctions and how on a day-to-day level a publisher would want to provide a book that actually talks about the nature of the virtual, for example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I completely agree with you. One of the things that Ted Streifus talks about in his book is how there is more than one kind of reading. So, for example, the kind of focused attention that we associate with print books is very different from the kind of broader bandwidth attention that we pay when we're reading something online, because that material that we're attending to online is in a context of other stuff going on our screen.
Yes, yes.
So they are different experiences, and the resulting knowledge, I would agree with you, is different. I don't know exactly how to characterize the difference, but I believe that it's real. Yeah.
I suspect that it's an important aspect of a quite deep discussion within the fields of philosophy and
Yes.
and then across disciplines as well within what we call humanities.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
The other question that I think is interesting is to go back to the point about how books are actually funded
Yes.
now, and how that works. So in a university press.
Okay. Well, traditionally, university presses were this was a long time ago, that we were in a reasonably good position, even if we were publishing works of scholarship that, while they might advance their fields significantly, could command only a limited readership, because the nature of the subject was inherently specialized.
Yeah.
And the reason for that was, the reason we could do that for a number of years was because we could count on selling certain number of copies to academic libraries. That's really changed a lot over the last, even predating the digital era. But it's really changed a lot in the last 30 years. So increasingly, university presses do rely on the marketplace to fund the cost of their publishing activity. Some of them get small subventions and in-kind support from their universities. But they're very vulnerable now.
Yeah.
There are about 140 university presses in the United States, and the smaller ones in particular, I think, are very vulnerable to this kind of a marketplace.
I was once told by a person, I guess your equivalent, at a university press, that I won't name because it might not be politic to name the press, which was, and I was told that the journals that they had, and they had a very good range of journals,
Yes.
were where the money was,
Yes.
and that really was a cross-subsidy of the books.
Yes, yes. I think that's often the case. Not all university presses have journals programs, but the ones that do tend to rely on that steady revenue from subscriptions.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's a fascinating world.
It is.
The publishing world.
The business model is very much under pressure, as it is in other media industries. And the digital transition is only one part of that. But
What are the other parts, do you
well,
think?
I think there are a lot of different trends converging. One is the sales to academic libraries have declined, as I mentioned. Another, is just possibly an oversupply of books and other media, and a declining readership for whatever reason. Yeah.
What do you have much of an interest, and do you try and gather research about what people actually do with the books? Are there a number of books that are published that are unread, for example, that sort of thing?
You know, we don't do a good job of gathering that kind of data. It would be very interesting to study that if there were a way. I think one of the interesting opportunities of the digital era is being able to know better how users interact with content. Yeah.
Well, one of the things that's happened in the academy, and I was just reading something about this today in relation to public intellectuals, is that the development of publishing around academic life has become more specialised to the point of being hyper-specialised.
Yes.
And there are thus only a few people who might actually be interested in a book that's published.
That's right.
And that's a kind of terrible paradox, I suppose, isn't it, to be in?
It is. It is. You know, I think that those kinds of books that are extremely narrow have a hard time getting published today, even by university presses. Even scholarly presses need books to command a readership of a certain size, because otherwise it's just not viable to publish them in book form.
No.
Yeah.
The other point that comes to mind about book publishing in particular is that it is often a way where unorthodox ideas are collected, curated, and discovered, produced and discovered.
Yes.
It's just that you have to go and read the book to find them.
That's right, yeah. Well, it's an interesting and I hope temporary phenomenon that, you know, so much of the media that we consume now is online. It's on the web, the open web. Even if it's somewhat protected by paywalls, you can read the New Yorker and the New York Times and the Boston Globe online. You can read many other things online. As a general principle, you can't read books online that way.
No.
They're conspicuous by their absence from the open web. And that's because publishers have done pretty good job of protecting their business model, but it's at the expense of books being available on the web in the same way that other content is. Yeah.
As someone who's particularly interested in the traditions of critical scholarship, it seems to me that books have a very significant role in that, and yet, and certainly MIT books have a important role in contributing to critical ideas and broader discourse around technology, around a whole range of fields in media.
Yep.
How do you kind of, do you try and promote and develop that field, or is it that those are the people who are coming to you, or do you seek them out?
We seek them out for sure, and they do come to us as well, and we're just very fortunate to be situated where we are at MIT, because we're at the center of a lot of interesting conversations about media, the present and future of media, and technology, and cognitive science, and psychology, and many other topics, computing. So, you know, from that fortunate position, we're able to drop in on a lot of conversations and talk with a lot of people who are doing really cutting edge work on these kinds of topics. Which
is great, because MIT also has the sort of long shadow of the military industrial complex.
Yes, it does.
Overhanging it, and very many millions of dollars every year directly from the Pentagon and their other kind of areas of society that may be a little bit shady. Well, not a little bit, they are very shady. And in some ways I suspect that the MIT press offers an important counterpoint to some of the excesses of what might be undertaken there, necessary in a university.
And I would say that MIT itself is very self-critical and self-reflective about those kinds of activities, especially in the past. And so there's a lot of self-reflection and you know, a wish for integrity about all of its activities. At least today there is.
No, that's great. That's good to hear.
So
that's good to hear. I suppose we should cut to the particular kinds of books
Okay.
that you focus on.
Okay.
As the editorial director,
Yep.
anybody who looks at the MIT Press site will see how many people are actually employed
Yes.
in the organisation.
Yep.
How does it work? If you can,
Okay, sure.
I know it's an unfair question with a limited amount of time.
No, I'm happy to
You can
answer
help.
that.
Okay.
We publish both books and journals. We're a large university press, as American presses go. Much smaller, of course, than the great English presses, Oxford and Cambridge. But we publish about 200 books a year, new titles, 30 journals. I have 11 editors who cover about 16 major subject areas across the sciences, humanities, and social sciences. So we don't publish in every field, but we publish deeply within those 16. And by deeply, I mean we publish books for scholars, for students, textbooks, reference works, and books for general readers.
Okay.
So all types.
Yeah.
Yeah. And my own acquisitions are focused in the areas of information science and communication. And I inherited that program from an editor who had really developed those two lists for us, and who left the press for another job last fall. So I'm still learning those fields myself, but it's been very interesting to work on these books.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And what are you finding? It's probably a good question to ask somebody who's new in the field.
I'm new in the field, so there are many interesting debates going on right now in this field in communication. Debates about privacy, information policy, data security, debates about internet culture, civil behavior online.
Yeah, right.
I have this book about internet trolling and what motivates the people who make up the anti-social web, I guess you would call it.
Okay, yeah, right.
We all know about the social web, but what about this anti-social web?
Right,
Who are
yes,
these people?
yeah, right.
And what do they want? And
Right.
why are they picking on the weak and the vulnerable online? That's
Yeah,
what they
right.
do.
Okay,
And they're
absolutely.
doing it for laughs. That's what they say.
Right.
So this is a very interesting book about that culture by an intrepid researcher who's gone underground to find out
really?
what
Okay.
motivates these trolls.
Okay.
So
And readable?
it's
Eminently
very readable. It's very funny. She's a great writer.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. Good.
So this is another sort of internet culture type of book. This is about why you should actually read the comments. You should
Likers, so the subtitle was reading the comments, and likers, haters, and manipulators at the bottom of the web.
the bottom of the
Is it?
web.
Right.
Yes.
By Joseph Riegel. Okay.
These are the bottom feet, and he's a local author. He's at BU,
Okay.
and this is his second book with us. His first book was about the culture of Wikipedia
Okay.
and what
Great.
motivates people to contribute their time to Wikipedia, which is a very interesting topic also. So yeah, Riegel is arguing that you should actually pay attention to the comments, and there's a lot of interesting stuff and revealing stuff there
absolutely.
to study. Yeah.
Well, it's one of the things that a book is going to be very slow to do,
Yeah.
if at all. You might write a letter, if you're a very passionate reader, you might write a letter to the author and send it to the publishing house and hope that the publisher will forward the letter on to the author or the email onto the author. But the internet provides almost instantaneous feedback, doesn't it?
Yes, I can tell you we don't get those letters anymore.
Oh, really?
It doesn't happen. Yeah.
Right. What about the point at which maybe a book is not successful or doesn't work, and you decide not to publish it? What kind of things, outside of good writing, what kind of things are you finding just don't work?
Well, we rely a lot on peer review because we're a university press, so we're, all of our publications are peer reviewed by experts in the field.
Right.
And a lot of the work that we publish is interdisciplinary, so it's experts in multiple fields. And that's a very interesting behind-the-scenes process of commentary, right?
Yes,
That's a genre unto itself that somebody should write about. So we have a high degree of confidence in the books that we publish, but you're quite right that some of them many of them don't make the cut. And often we find that out in the peer review process. And often the peer review process confirms the editor's own instincts about the project. Either that it's not going to make an impact to the extent that it would need to, or it's not going to command the readership it should, or it's just not well executed for one reason or another. Yeah.
I notice we have to wind up, but I wanted to ask you about the way you feel MIT Press connects with Boston, the sense, if any, of how you feel part of the life of the city.
Well, we are very, very fortunate to be in Boston because there's so many great campuses, so many great academics, and they're all here in our backyard. Our editors travel a lot to other campuses, but we spend a lot of time locally on campuses here in the area. So we do feel very connected to the different academic communities within the Boston area. We also publish books about the history of Boston and of the region. We've published a number of really good books about that. So,
which is a whole other field of I guess, detail about how people connect with the city and its intellectual and academic traditions.
Absolutely.
Which is important to the identity of this city.
Yes, it is.
Well, Gita, thank you very much for being here tonight.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome, and I think it adds a terrific texture to the conversations we're having about what goes on in the media and communication field in Boston. So
I really enjoyed it.
Well, I suppose we should say to the media and communication field in Boston and then Cambridge.
And
is that
in
right?
Cambridge, yes.
Okay, all right. So that's it. Thank you. That's it from me, Marcus Breen. You've been watching Boston Media Theory. Until next time, good night.